Sorry?
What kind of a boy were you back in your childhood?
God, we're going that far back, aren't we?
The Big Bang.
I was an only child, for a start. And, well, you mean like at school, studious, pretty studious. And then I eventually started playing guitar as well, and, you know, that was basically it, you know.
I think the question was, were you a curious child or artistically inclined, or was you sports-minded?
No, I certainly wasn't sports-minded at all. I was, far more, artistic, aesthetic.
When did you sort of awaken to that sort of sensibility?
I don't know. It was just a part of me, I suppose.
You read a lot of books?
Yes, I read a lot of books. I drew as well, because in fact I went to art college as well after doing just, my main studies through to like the first big set of exams, which is the GCE over there, and I did pretty well with those, but I left, I sort of, well, actually by the time I was at approaching those exams and all the revision and all the hard work for it, I was actually doing gigs at the time with a band, and when I finished schooling, I went straight into going on the road in the back of a van and all this sort of thing, but I kept getting ill, so then I took on my other great love, which was art. So I went to art college and continued obviously to play guitar, and I was playing in an interval group at the Marquee Club in London, etc. So I was still playing all the way through.
Why did you keep getting ill?
I don't know. It's glandular fever. I've got a good idea. Probably because one wasn't eating properly, and a lot of coming off the stage. Because I used to perspire quite a bit. Rain on stage, basically. And I still do, and it was sort of getting in the back of the van, sleeping on the equipment, driving to the next gig. It's not really the best way to sort of carry on. And I used to get ill.
Do you recall what you were most strongly influenced by or inspired by when you were a boy, when you were young, like in your pre-musician days?
Musically, pre-musically.
I think it can include anything. It can be a book or a movie or a person or an event.
Salvador Dali, quite possibly. Yeah, Salvador Dali.
Do you remember how old you were at the time?
Oh, I don't know, about 10, something like that.
Like
his artwork, and then I started to read about him and found him quite fascinating.
What were you inspired by?
Well, his artwork, and also his sense of humour and his theatre.
There was a rumor going around for quite a while in Japan back in the halcyon days of Led Zeppelin that your mother was Japanese. There's no Japanese blood in your family, is there?
No, but I used to get teased at school. I used to say that I was a Japanese father, actually, then. And in fact, when I came here, people thought I had a Japanese wife. But in fact, I didn't, because I wasn't married. So it does figure, doesn't it? Japanese seems to figure with me somewhere.
This was I told him about that you like Dali. He said, have you always been interested in surrealistic art?
Yes, I was, extremely, and Dada as well, but actually my taste sort of matured towards pre-Raphaelites. Actually, I went back, but when I was at art college, I had, it was rather disappointing because I wanted to learn the techniques of oil painting and glazing techniques, and they just, there wasn't, to be perfectly truthful, there wasn't anybody there that did it. I mean, they'd all been to the Royal College, and they were, they'd had their one-man exhibition after the Royal College, usually two-man exhibition, and hadn't made it, and these were the tutors that you had, and they were really right up to what was happening at the moment, acrylics, etc., and using, whatever there was that was currently coming on the market, so to speak, and there just wasn't anyone that could teach you any glazing techniques. So, but nevertheless, it was one of the most important parts of my education at art college.
So did you have to do it on your own? Did you just give up on learning about glazing the pre-Raphaelites?
Well, no, my draftsmanship wasn't good enough to be perfectly truthful with you. But nevertheless, I did pretty well at art college. So.
Are there any actual works that you're like, say, favorite paintings or sculptures or anything? Any favorite works you have? Your personal favorites?
My own? No, I burnt all my work when I left art college.
You burnt them?
Yeah.
Was that a symbolic gesture?
Yes, it was. I do these sort of things, you see.
Right to the past.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I mean, just for that, because you wanted to make a change.
Yeah, sure.
So you rounded up all your favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Threw in the fireplace.
Yeah, basically because it wasn't that good, I suppose.
I see. Oh, your own stuff.
Yeah.
But the question was about like, say, famous stuff that you personally like.
Oh no, I'm not that much of a Philistine. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
for instance, I collect antiques and I do have quite a reasonable art collection. And for instance, if I've had some antique lamps when they got broken, I felt terrible. One of them got broken, I just felt terrible because I felt, I was a curator for this thing. So you pass them on afterwards, don't you?
I think you just wanted the names of some of your favorites.
Okay. Well, I've got some works by Rossetti, Burne-Jones. Richard Doyle is a fairy, painter, extremely intricate. So they're Victorian artists. Ernst Fuchs. Who's an Austrian artist. Beauchard, who's a sort of hermetic artist. I can't give you a whole rundown of everything I've got.
Other surrealists also, like aside from Dali?
Oh yes. Max Ernst, for instance, Max Ernst.
Oh, Max Ernst.
Yeah. When I went to the Metropolitan Museum, there's a painting there by called Napoleon in the Wilderness, and I must have spent about 2 hours looking at that.
Right.
Yeah, fabulous painting. Duchamp, Magritte.
When you first had that sort of encounter with Dali's stuff when you were like 10 years old, you said, I guess you sort of awakened you to your interest in the surreal side.
Well, absolutely, it was, the surreal aspect of it, and it was a famous one that might add. It was sort of the melting watches and the crutches, and it just stimulated my imagination.
He was wondering that seems to be like a common sort of theme that runs through the music you've done.
Yeah,
Is that an apt observation, you think?
I think it's an extremely, fine observation. Yeah.
And I guess that would sort of link in with your interest in Aleister Crowley and the
I don't know why it would link in with it. I don't have any. I refute immediately any inference to the fact that I'm a black magician or have anything to do with black magic. However, I've read books and spent a lot of time reading books on mysticism of Eastern and Western traditions and comparative religions and then astrology, etc. Tarot. But because you read and study, for instance, astrology, it doesn't make you a black magician. But unfortunately, some critics and reviewers think you are.
I didn't think he was like accusing you.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's the way it goes.
But it seems like you do have an interest in that type of thing, which is
sure. I've already told you that I also read about the pre-Raphaelites and as well. For instance, I'm sure he doesn't want me to sit here and give my recommended reading list, but that's just a minor part of my what I've read in my time and studied in my time.
You said like you rounded up all your stuff and burned it one time. You said that your draftsmanship maybe wasn't up to par.
Yeah.
But it must have been like a very painful decision on your part to move away from painting or drawing, which is what you eventually did, right?
It wasn't so much. It wasn't so painful. It was just a sequence of events. I really enjoyed being at art college, and I enjoyed, doing what I was doing. But the reason for the ritual burning was for the very reason that, thank God there's no sort of Jimmy Page artwork appearing in Sotheby's auction rooms, and this is why I did it. Basically, I had some foresight. But what was happening was that I was playing in an interval band in a blues club, and this is in about 1963, 4, and I was asked to play on a record, on a session, and this record just managed to scrape into the charts, about number 20, And at this time the Stones were happening, and the Beatles were happening, and the sort of hardcore session musicians were all, quite old guys. And in fact, the youngest guitarist that they had there was about 3 years older than I was, and he wasn't really in touch with all the sort of blues roots and everything that these other bands that were happening were involved with. Whereas I knew all this sort of stuff, and so it's pretty obvious what happened next. They said, "Who's this guitarist? And let's get him in on other records." And whereas to begin with I was maybe doing one session a week, which was probably my audition to see how I'd get on in it, this was then building and building and building till I was doing what they were asking me to do, ones in the daytime. I was doing the ones in the evening, okay. And I was having really good fun, as you can imagine, of playing with bands like them and all this sort of stuff. We all know this bands that I play with, but it was with groups, and they were saying, just do a riff here and do a riff there and do a solo here, and it was great fun, because I really loved playing the guitar. And it just came to the point where I had to make a decision. And I knew really, I knew all the time, the guitar was my first love, so, and that was it. So, and then once I left the art college, I was doing, 3 sessions a day, 6 days a week. So, and that's why I was on so many records in the 60s.
Yeah. So when you talk about sessions, were they mainly blues sessions? But you also mentioned them and.
Initially, it was with bands, and sort of being brought in with the bands, and then there were. As I say, you can imagine. What are we saying? I was doing at least 15. We'll say 16 sessions a week. It wasn't just with bands. I was doing things with orchestras as it went on. Obviously not initially, but after, say, for 6 months of doing this, I was playing on film tracks and folk sessions, for instance with Burt Bacharach, film music and his albums and the singles when he did them in England. There was a complete variety, and by that point I was starting to learn to read music, something which I hadn't done before. And it was really good, really basically from the studio discipline that evolved through that.
Mm-hmm. He asked a question there about blues, though. There weren't that many actual blues sessions.
Well, there weren't that many blues artists who came to England to record. Right. It's as simple as that. I played with Sonny Boy Williamson on one album, and Otis Spann, who was related to Muddy Waters. Those are the two that I could think of.
Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page.
A lot of white guitar players will cite Beck and Clapton and yourself, the great guitar triumvirate in the 60s and 70s as major influences. But he seems to think that you were sort of a bit different in your approach to the blues, different from Clapton and Beck, that is. And he cites the example of drinking muddy waters from the Little Dreams.
Drinking muddy water, yeah.
Drinking muddy water from
which is, as he's saying, is rolling and tumbling
right, exactly.
roots, but just in so much as that is Howling Wolf's Meet Me in the Bottom, is also, Howling Wolf, it's called Meet Me in the Bottom, is also, I mean, you know, there's just as many...
The point there is that you seem to, that seemed to break new ground.
It probably did.
Drinking muddy water.
Well, it probably did.
Thinking back in retrospect.
Yeah, in those days, yeah, that's right. Once, you know, I was actually recording stuff that I was being involved in writing, yeah. But I think even, you know, with Zeppelin, our approach to the blues was, even, you know, it wasn't just leaning on the traditional sort of emulating what there was before. It was taking it onwards into another dimension. Yeah.
But thinking back in retrospect, what do you think you did to the blues?
Purely what I just said then, just taking it into another dimension.
That dimension being?
Something that hadn't been done before.
Could you just make it louder and harder? Or
no, I wouldn't say louder. Maybe more intense. I wouldn't say louder, because the whole thing about Zeppelin was that it could be, you know, like thunder one moment and like a whisper the next within the same song. You know, light and shade.
I see. Okay.
So maybe more light and shade.
Perspective.
Certainly, yeah, and the dramatic quality as well.
So, do you think you were more flexible with the blues than, say, Clapton and Beck were, whereas they tended to put it up on a pedestal and deify the
Well,
musicians?
for a start, you see Eric, especially in the days of John Mayall, where he actually made his reputation as a blues player, was actually digesting all these different players like Freddie King, B.B. King, etc., 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 and actually playing those phrases, linking them all up together. Whereas I was more intent in coming up with my own phrasing for blues and my own approach to playing it, just in the same way as with the riffs. I mean, I always came up with original riffs purely through, you know, just searching.
Do you think that those, like Clapton...
But they put them on the pedestal.
Yeah, whereas you were a little more flexible, you thought, well, it's just one style, and you sort of used that as your, as one medium.
Well, you see, well, wait a minute. I think Eric certainly did. I don't know whether Jeff did, because my roots weren't, and neither were Eric's or Jeff's, just blues. Even though Eric, you know, made that his niche, so to speak. He, you know, my roots went back to the early rock and roll. You see, and everything that was guitar orientated anyway, as did Jeff's. So, yeah, I mean, my interest basically was in the guitar as an instrument with 6 strings and what could be done with it. And that just didn't include just playing blues or just playing rock and roll. It included playing, you know, acoustic music and, you know what I've done, so.
Yeah, I think...
Good.
I'm quite enjoying the Yardbirds, right? When the first offer was made.
I was approached, actually after the Sonny Boy Williamson sessions, by Giorgio Gomelski, the manager, and he said that Eric was giving problems, and he didn't want to do this and he didn't want to do that, and would I join the Yardbirds? Would I, you know, replace him? And I didn't want to be part of anything like that. In other words, they were trying an underhand move, stab in the back, and I didn't want to do that.
Trying to kind of maneuver him out of the band.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't going to be the man to cut Eric's, you know, stab Eric in the back. But basically it was because he didn't want to get that commercial. Apparently, that's what it was all about. But then it came to the point where Eric actually left, and I was approached again. Well, this time now Eric's left, so, you know, it's free for you to join without any sort of conscience. And I said, no, I don't think so. But I know a man who you should really check out, and I think he'd be perfect for the band. And that, of course, was Jeff. So that was that.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
He heard a rumor once that there was supposed to be a live Yardbirds album, but you were not happy with it all because of the sound quality. So you bought up all the copies and made sure that nobody...
Okay. The album we're referring to is Live at the Anderson Theatre. And Epic had said, would we consider a live recording? So we said, yeah, sure, sounds good. That sounds good. And they sent down their staff producer. His name was Manny Kellum. Well, bless his heart, it wasn't his fault. But he'd only been used to doing light orchestral music in the past. And here he is facing this whole problem of recording a band live on the stage, you know. And he just didn't know how to approach it. He didn't know what to do. He had one microphone on the drum kit. And it was obviously going to be a total failure. But the most important thing about it was that Keith Relf, it wasn't one of his good nights. And we had the power of artistic decision on this as to whether it, should, whether we let it go further on after that, because obviously you don't just let somebody record you live and let them put it out. You have an artistic decision on this. Well, now the whole point about it was that, all in all, it wasn't a good night. I mean, if they'd have done another night, it would have been fine. But at the time, I remember it was mainly because we all said that Keith, it wasn't a good night for Keith. Apart from the fact that it wasn't recorded properly either. Now, this chap said to us, we can perform miracles in the studio. You just don't know what can be done. Well, I thought, this is interesting, because I've probably had more studio experience than you have, my friend. But certainly with rock and roll, anyway. So he went away with these tapes, and we had a call, will you come and have a listen to them? Well, we went to have a listen to them, and all that he'd done to it was, whereas obviously people had been listening to what we were doing, he'd overdubbed these cheers. It sounded like a corrida, a bullfight. So halfway through Days of Confusion, "Rah!" Which was nothing like what was really happening. It was just laughable, and we said, no, sorry, forget it, that's not coming out. But you see, once Led Zeppelin was around, and living, so to speak, and doing very well at that, suddenly Epic decided, you know what record companies are like, we all know the way it goes. Oh, look, we've got a tape with this chap on, Jimmy Page, so we'll put it out. So it went out, but it was immediately stopped. But that's, it's the old greedy people.
So you didn't have to go out and buy them, right?
No, we just slapped an injunction on them. Yeah, pretty quickly.
Right, it was an 同じナンバーやってもZeppelinの方がはるかにいい。It's like the difference between like the Yardbirds and Zeppelin doing the same number is like chalk and cheese. I guess it could be attributed to Keith Relf's inferior vocal.
No, I'm not knocking Keith Relf's vocals.
No, he was just saying that's his own personal opinion.
No, as long as we don't knock Keith Relf vocals at all. No. Has nothing to do with that. Has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is the fact that the Yardbirds was a perfect vehicle for a guitarist to be able to, because there were numbers where it's something which I continued into Zeppelin, where they used to call it freeform areas, which basically was improvisation. Well, once I was just the only guitarist there, and unfortunately there's very little that's you can hear where Jeff and I were in the band. There's just happenings 10 years time ago and Stroll on. There's very little, unfortunately. That would have made a good live album. But where I was just on my own, obviously where I had all this, these areas to sort of play and invent, I came up with a lot of my own passages and riffs, and consequently, once they decided that they didn't want to go on anymore. And curious enough, the one thing that Keith Relf said when I was saying, well, surely we can try this, that, or the other, he came out with quite a surprising statement. Actually, he said, actually, the magic of the band went for me when Eric went. Which I thought, well, I'm fighting a losing battle here, because I thought that Jeff Beck had done all the interesting work in between that time, But You know, that was that. But however, no, it was a fact that we had the musicians that we had in Led Zeppelin were more inventive, really. You know. So that's no slant on the Yardbirds at all. It's just that, you know.
Yeah.
No,
With the Yardbirds, you guys had already been doing Dazed and Confused.
Mhm.
So I mean, I guess the concept of Zeppelin, the Zeppelin sound, was more or less existed at least in your mind, and you know, to a degree.
Well, as I said, I had a whole number of passages and riffs that I'd worked out, which were purely my own invention, and yes, I certainly knew what way to go with Led Zeppelin, but it wasn't just those parts of that was part of it. The most important part that sets us aside from any other band at that time is the use of the acoustic and the way that it was employed.
In Zeppelin?
Sure thing. The acoustic guitar
Right.
and the way that it was employed. For instance, a good example for this, of what I'm talking about, and this is what I had planned in my mind before I'd even met Robert Plant, for instance. I had the arrangement for Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And I mean, that was totally revolutionary. No one had ever thought of doing something like that before, in that style. I actually heard that number on a Joan Baez LP, and if you ever heard it, you probably wouldn't think it was the same thing at all. I thought it's a traditional number at the time. And just employing, you know, the light and shade, the drama, the way that the actual electric parts come in with the drums. I mean, nobody had ever thought of anything like this before. So that was all part of it, but, you know, so there was the use of the acoustic, and also the, for instance, the folk roots are most important as well, because Black Mountain Side, in fact, is an Irish melody, which again was a traditional song, and but to use that with like tabla drums, of course, this is something which is a bit unusual, but it was this having a complete, you know, sort of cycle of music, many dimensions of it, from blues, rock, the experimental side where you've got like within Dazed and Confused the bowing of the guitar, etc. And I you know, that's the way that I wanted the band to be. From the start.
The original seeds of like innovation, though.
It's all on the first album. It's all there. I mean, all of it. You know, it's just that they're there. From there, you see the way that it grows and matures.
This is a question that emanates from your mention of the use of the acoustic guitar, but you've always shown a great respect for Pentangle, Bert Jansch.
Well, not necessarily Pentangle, but Bert Jansch. Yeah, sure thing. Yeah.
The question was, have you always liked traditional acoustic music from when you were, say...
Well, certainly that type of acoustic music, yeah.
Meaning with...
Well, Bert Jansch's style of playing and finger picking, yeah.
From like
as opposed to just strumming, yeah, finger picking and movement. In fact, I went to see Bert Jansch play once, and he does all this sort of bending string stuff on the records, and he didn't even have his own guitar. This chap didn't have his own guitar. He just borrowed a gut-strung guitar for the night, and he was still bending all the strings. It sounded exactly the same. And watching him play, it was like watching Julian Bream. He was having all these sort of like Bach inversions.
What does he have that Bream doesn't? Why would you say prefer Jansch to Bream?
I'm not saying I prefer. I was saying watching him was like watching a classical player.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in his approach and the way that he fingered the guitar. You know, at the time I was quite impressed with that. It was quite an influence on me, actually.
Getting back to the question, how old were you when you first got into that sort of acoustical, traditional stuff?
Well, I picked up the guitar at 13, and it took me quite a while to become acquainted with all these different people. I guess, I know I was doing studio work anyway. Or was I maybe I was at art college. I might have been at art college, I don't know.
Well, it was long before that, though.
Oh, Lord, yeah. Yeah, 17, 18.
じゃあ
And the acoustic guitarist I was listening to, I might add.
Who else?
Lorindo Almeida, who is sort of classical and jazz as well. You know, I was devouring every kind of guitar style that I could get.
I said that the the first album was very innovative because
that was where we had our first sort of what was called a break. Probably it was only about 3 weeks a month off before we did something. Probably 3 weeks actually. But Robert and I went to into the country in Wales to an isolated cottage. It was so isolated that there was no electricity there even. It was just gaslight, gas cooking, and the only electricity we had were in these cassette things for reference, and the electricity we generated together. But because, for instance, the second album had been recorded while we were on the road, basically, so they had all the energy of rock and roll touring in it, lots of rock riffs. But of course now, we were off the road, right in the middle of the countryside, and totally, mellowed out, so to speak, and that reflects in the music that was written there.
I guess.
Of course, we did it on acoustic guitars because, you couldn't use electric.
But was it like 3-4 years in the making, that record?
4 years.
Like having mental, like you had always been into the acoustic guitar there. Had you always had in the back of your mind an idea for an acoustic-oriented album? Because I guess about half of that album is sort of acoustic tracks.
No, that's not the way it is. No. But I always wanted to employ the acoustic guitar right from the start. No, I'd say the way that even though I'd use this sort of starting with the acoustic, for instance, Gallows Pole, and bringing in the Brown Age, I wanted to come up with, and even Your Time Is Going to Come, another one which is sort of comes into it's heavily acoustic oriented. Nevertheless, I wanted to come up with something which really summarised everything, and with the electric and the acoustic. We're going back really to this sort of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You almost, and that was like the whole structure for Stairway was built around this idea. But that was taken from like the acoustic introduction, taking it right through to like a climax at the end. But you see, even that broke rules, because the one thing that musicians don't do, are told never to do, and it's totally taboo, is to speed up or slow down. Well, there's that as I say, broke all the rules, because it speeds up all the way through to reach this climax at the end.
If I clear up the record before going on to the next chronological period, is when you were doing these sessions back in the mid-'60s, is the legend of you doing the solo one, You Really Got Me, by the Kinks. Is that actually you?
I played on the Kinks records, yes.
You didn't
I played on quite a number of Kinks records, as did a drummer. I mean, it wasn't even the Kinks drummer on those things either. And he played the drums. Yeah.
But did you actually do a solo there?
I did solos on the Kinks records.
But you don't remember about that particular track?
Well, I've answered the question. Why is it so important about the Kinks?
Just the truth.
Let me ask a question. Why is it so important?
反対に聞きたいんだけど、そのキンクスのことは何でその重要なのか。
いや、なんか単なるミーハーなのか。
いや、雑学的なね、好奇心っていう。Just
trivia. Get a trivial answer then.
ものすごくファンだから、自分のみんなジミー・ペイジがやってると思うとすごく幸せな気分になるんだ。
You see, for the true Jimmy Page fans, derive happiness from the fact that knowing you're playing on that song, as opposed to somebody else.
Yeah, no, I was on the Kinks records. Yeah. You see, the thing is, it's Ray Davis who says that I was never on any Kinks records, right? Is this what we're getting at? Well, this is a fact, you see. He says that I was never on any Kinks records, but I was. And it gets boring. But the other side of this coin is that I was also on the Who's Can't Explain.
Is that right?
And I wasn't needed. I wasn't needed on that at all. And it's. I was just playing the riff on that. Townsend did the lead on that. But he was fine about it. He was overjoyed that I was on it, because, he sort of respected my playing.
Why didn't Townsend do it himself?
He did. That's what I'm saying. He did. I was just backing up the riff at the, underneath on that. But it's just a difference between two different people.
Oh, I see, yeah.
You know.
Yeah. それに引っかかったのは、デイビスはもうずっと長いね。Did you decide to form Zeppelin like in the waning days of the Yardbirds then?
No, because we were doing so well in America on basically on an underground scene. We weren't getting hit records anymore, especially once we met Mickey Most. It was some of probably the worst records were done, really, in a way, representative to what we were doing on stage. He wasn't interested in albums, even though things were now moving into an album market. He was just interested in singles, and in fact he got us to record some stuff which was really horrific, actually. And it used to be the sort of thing, well, let's just try it, we don't have to put it out. Once people, I've learned from those days, once people say that, you're in trouble if you do it. But sure, I had ideas of how I'd like things to go with the Yardbirds, but for instance, I'll tell you the sort of things we were doing on stage. We had one number called Glimpses, and I was doing things with the bow and playing back tapes in the background of different things. It was getting quite arty in its way, and we were getting great receptions in America. And but it was mainly Keith. You see, don't forget, already one guy had already split from the band. And I was there when he did it, Paul Samuel Smith, the bass player, and he said, and if I was you, Keith, I'd leave as well. And this was way back, before I'd even gone in there. So, maybe the whole excitement for them of the band had just gone. Well, as I've already said, the quote of Keith Relf. So, even though I could see a lot of potential in what we were doing musically, they didn't have their hearts in it, and I guess that. That's all that has to be said, really. If you don't have your heart in something, it's not going to be any good, is it?
So one of the seeds for...
So, obviously, the ideas that I had, sure, that became the backbone of whatever the band was going to be, and it became Led Zeppelin. Mm-hmm. And I was just very fortunate that I came across the other musicians. I mean, it was almost as though it was destined to be, really.
You knew you were going to do another project?
I knew I was going to do, yeah, sure, what was I going to do? Yeah, I always go back to art college, yeah.
Of course, also a hypothetical question. You had the concept in your mind for the next project, and after a while, I guess you had John Paul Jones as well. If you hadn't come across Robert Plant and Bonzo, do you think you would have gone to make something very similar, or would it have been quite a bit different from what you got?
It wouldn't have been as good. That's for sure. Yeah. The way things happened was that I started to search for musicians, and I went to see, well, actually the person that I had in mind was a chap, purely because I'd been on a tour with the Yardbirds. This is a wonderful bill, let me tell you. If you can picture this, there was this guy called Terry Reid, yeah, sure, who was in a band called Peter J and the Jaywalkers. They opened up the show, then it was Ike and Tina Turner review, intermission, Yardbirds and the Rolling Stones. What a wonderful bill, eh? But anyway, I knew of his voice, and I thought, that's the guy I want to get, because I wanted to get someone who real ballsy singer, sort of like a Steve Marriott type, this sort of thing was there. And I called him up, and curiously enough, he'd just signed up to Mickey Most, the man that I'd just left. So he couldn't do it, but he recommended Robert. And I went to see Robert, and he was singing in a teacher's training college where I saw him. He was tarmacking by day.
What's that?
Tarmacking, laying tarmac roads. Right, okay. And I got him down to my place to really illustrate to him what I had in mind, because he'd been in bands up there, playing around for quite a while, nothing had happened with him, and he had played with John Bonham, and in fact, there's in that box set there's a picture of him. There's 2 years prior to Led Zeppelin, So, you know, although they had played in the past. And so Robert, mapped this thing out to him. Fortunately, he had enough vision and imagination to give it a shot. And at that point, that's when John Paul Jones, who knew that I, left sessions anyway to join the Yardbirds when I did, basically to play with Jeff, because we were good friends. He called me up, and we still didn't have a drummer, although I had a drummer in mind, and I knew exactly what, it needed a powerhouse type of drummer, like a sort of, the Keith Moon type of thing, but with a little more invention to it. I had somebody in mind. He said, let's go and see, would you come and see this chap, John Bonham? He said, I think it's the way you're describing this, it's just exactly the right sort of thing. The moment I saw him, that was it. He was going to be the drummer, all right. He was playing with a chap called Tim Rose, who did Hey Joe, which Hendrix did. Hendrix covered Hey Joe, but he was touring around England, and John Bonham was the drummer. And I think probably that's of any named people, that's the only one you can really sort of say that John Bonham had played with, apart from the groups in the Midlands, as Robert had. But he wasn't sure whether he wanted to join the group. It took quite a lot of convincing to get him. Now, for whatever reason this is, I don't know. I'll leave it to your imagination to think why at this point he wasn't sure whether he wanted to join the group, as he'd played with Robert in the past. So, however, we got him down, and we just had one rehearsal. So really, this band came together very, very quickly, in fact. This is why I say it almost had to be destined. Just from the one rehearsal that we had, in a very small rehearsal room, no bigger than this, we just knew straight away that was it.
Just making an order for batteries again. Nagashima-san, Tansan Denshi were rumors to the effect that when you first asked Robert to join the band, you said something to the effect that
first album, and I was paying retainers to both Robert Plant and John Bonham, hoping that the band would take off to the degree where then it would I'd be paid back what I'd put in, and then everyone was on an equal share after that. So it didn't take, it actually didn't take that long, did it, really?
But you put yourself out
I put myself on the line for what I believed in. I always do. I always have and always will.
When you guys first went into the studio, I guess Robert and John Bonham had very little experience. They hadn't been in the studio. What was the weight on your shoulders to do most of the work?
Well, the good thing about it, of course, was that John Paul Jones was a seasoned campaigner in the studio. I had done production before anyway with a defunct label which Andrew Oldham had called Immediate Records. I produced on it. In fact, I produced Nico. You remember Nico?
Yeah, sure.
Velvet Underground. Well, so I'd done a bit of production anyway. So I think it helped. The other important thing was that I'd learnt a lot from being in the studio as a session musician, and I knew what not to do, which was to put a drummer in a little drum booth, which everybody did, and I knew that wasn't the way to do it, and that because I've been on some wonderful sessions where the drummers had played their hearts out and it sounded like they were hitting old suitcases, and I knew that I had definite ideas of how things should be done, how they should be recorded. And the first thing was to get the drums into an area where they could breathe, and you get all the harmonics and they'd sound like drums, So of course that, for a start, that made, even if he'd been in the studio before, I don't know whether he had or not, I knew, he was going to give him confidence because the drums were going to sound right for a change, Robert Plant had a few solo records out, so he'd been in the studio at least, but it just and the added part of it as well was that we'd actually routine this material, and we'd had a little mini tour of Scandinavia, which actually was an old commitment that was left over from the Yardbirds, and so we were pretty confident that we knew what we were doing when we went in, and I knew how to get it sounding right, and that was that.
So things really clicked in the studio. It wasn't like kind of struggling and saying, no, that's not...
Well, we knew it wasn't going to be a struggle because we knew right from that first rehearsal and the tour that we were doing, we were playing well, we gelled.
ロバート・プラントは曲作りも
Since you were, I guess, the most experienced songwriter, I mean, you were obviously capable of putting songs together at the time.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Well, are we to assume that you handle all the songwriting chores for the first
Well, yes, I'd written quite a lot of songs in the past. Anyway, I wanted to encourage Robert to write. Yeah, sure. On the first album, I did quite a lot of lyrics, but I wanted Robert to. I wanted to encourage him as a writer because I felt, and I still, it's something I thought of. I still adhere to this actually. That if a singer is putting his lyrics in, he's going to sing them with far more conviction than. Don't forget, I mean, at this point, there's a cast iron grip on everything. If I'm giving all the musical arrangements, virtually, suggesting what notes, everyone's going to be playing or singing. It was important as a group. This is because this is, I was intent on forming, a magnificent group. It had to be a group, so consequently it needed all the input. You see, so yeah, I encouraged Robert to write, bit by bit. He's doing a verse here and a verse there, and of course my idea was that my written lyrical contribution would, be small and small as it went on, which is the way it went. So yes, in the early days I was supplying quite a lot of
将来的にそのロバート・プラントが曲を書けるようになるというビジョンはなかったんでしょうかね。その時点で、ずっとこのパターンで作っていくという気分はあったのかな。
というか、最初は
To interject something here, Robert isn't credited for writing on that first album because he had a songwriting agreement which hung over from before. And so that's why his name was left off for the writing of some of the tracks.
現にmaybe a rather strange way of putting it, but of all the Zeppelin records, I guess we could say that the first is about as close to a Jimmy Page solo record as you would have gotten.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, you kind of rounded up the members.
I suppose so.
I
I suppose you could say that. You could say that, yeah. In a way, possibly. But I still think of it as a group effort, but still.
Had you anticipated that?
No, not really. No, not really. No, not the way that it did.
Yeah.
Because it's curious. In the first dates that we were playing, we went back to we played in Scandinavia. We also went back there again, and we were playing around England, various clubs and things. And the reaction was incredible at the end, but a lot of it, people didn't really know what we were doing because, they hadn't, there was nothing like it. There was nothing like it around. But by the time we got to America, purely because of the input that there had been for me in the Yardbirds, they were very, very keen to hear what I was up to, what I've been up to. So obviously they were very keen to come and hear what we were doing, and that's where it really took off. Because to begin with, over there, we were supporting the Vanilla Fudge, and we weren't even billed. But once that was just a short. I can't remember how many dates. So we're supporting the Vanilla Fudge, about 8. Then we started doing a few dates on our own. We did the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood, and the reaction was incredible there. It wasn't until the next step on, which was San Francisco, when we got there, that it just took off. I think the main reason for this was that San Francisco, it became like a very sort of family situation with all the bands jamming with each other and everything, and and they were very used to what they were hearing, and we just went in there and hit it like a bolt, like a bolt of lightning, really, and it was just incredible. just the whole reaction, and it was from that point that the whole reputation of this band, just spread from there. It was like wildfire all over the States. Everyone then was really wanting to go and hear what it was all about, and that's when it really took off.
You actually told to perform as the new Yardbirds in England at the outset?
No, I explained that we had some... When the Yardbirds split up, as a total measure of how disenchanted they were with the band, they left the name with me, okay? But they also left some contractual obligations as well, which was, as I said, in Scandinavia. So we changed our name as soon as we possibly could to Led Zeppelin. We changed our name to Led Zeppelin after that.
Contractual obligations in Scandinavia, huh?
Yeah, we had some contractual. There was like some dates that had been set, which were forgotten about at the time that they went, but they were there in the future to fulfil. So it just so happened that we fulfilled that as the new Yardbirds at the time. So,
I see. I see. Huh.
Name, if I'd have pulled out, I'd got sued, wouldn't I?
The first record came out when he was still in high school, and it more or less changed his life, and then I guess he got him into this career. How about for you guys actually putting the record together? Were you actually conscious of the fact that you were sort of changing rock history at the time, and you were doing more than just throwing your hat into the ring? You were actually...
No, I knew, as I said, I explained exactly what, from the previous question, exactly what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to showcase on this first album. So I knew that it hadn't been done before.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, I knew exactly what was happening.
But did you consider the fact that you'd be changing certain people's lives with this stuff? Because I mean, obviously.
Well, obviously not at that time. No. Yeah.
The success of the first record forced you to record the second one in various places, which at the time was a very irregular, very strange approach to recording it, a very unusual approach.
We always had strange approaches to recording, but yes, that's true.
You was wondering if that was a burden at all, having to
No, because writing the stuff, some of the stuff was written, obviously beforehand, like Whole Lot of Love and Ramble On. What Is and What Should Never Be. Let's see, what else did we do? Anyway, we did 4 of the numbers in a recording studio in London before we went on to the American tour. But yes, the idea was to actually record in America, because I wanted to record in American studios.
Why did you want to record it?
Because the studio sounded better to me.
So if anything, it helped you, as opposed to being a burden?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. In the energy of a tour as well, within the writing as well. Sure.
A little technical question here. Why is Good Times, Bad Times on the double album, but not on the quadruple album?
No real reason. The fact, you see, once I'd got the running order of the 4 CDs, obviously numbers were left off. Mm-hmm. It's obvious. Quite a lot of numbers are left off. And the whole remastering process from analog to digital is an extremely lengthy process, I might add, which is quite a surprise to me, actually, just how long it took. And for example, I arrived in New York, slept, and then went in the studio the next day, and working away, and the jet lag sort of hit me. And I said, I think I'm going to have to go back to the hotel. And they said, well, it's no wonder you've been working 14 hours. And this is how it continued for the next sort of 5 days. 12, 14 hours per session, so to speak. But it was proposed that Atlantic said, can we put out a double CD? And considering I put so much forethought into this running order and the way that it should go, and representing everything, I thought, well, rather than take anything away from this, we'll just put out whatever tracks there be that seem to be the firm favourites for the double, as in chronological order, and as Good Times, Bad Times didn't appear on the 4 CD set. It just happened to appear. There's no real reason for it other than that, really.
Zeppelin from the first album to the second album sort of achieved, rock stardom of Beatlesque proportions, and nobody else has really equaled that kind of success. Looking back in retrospect on that, how was it? And what was it to you? Was it a dreamlike phase in your career, or was it vindication for the vision you had?
A certain vindication, yeah. But we obviously it was a vindication because I knew I got it right. The whole thing was the right way, obviously, by the way that it touched and has touched so many people. As far as the amount of people coming to the concerts, that never diminished all the way through the career of Led Zeppelin, right to the end. It was just a question of supply and demand, and to the size of football stadiums or whatever it was. They just got to the point when they always sold out. So it never stopped growing, in actual fact.
But what was it like to be in the center of that kind of attention all of a sudden? Because it was obviously happening to you for the first time. Did you feel like you had become someone different, or how does it look in retrospect?
Oh well, I was just putting all my energies into work and treating it as a craft, basically. I was just putting it back in. Everything was just going back into the writing and everything else.
You didn't start thinking of yourself as a pop icon.
No, those are labels that were strung around my neck by reviewers, etc. The media,
This is going on to the third album here. He wanted to ask you why he had done it originally, and I said you already answered the question a while ago.
Good.
So I should summarize it there.
Yeah.
Save you some trouble.
Right.
So he was saying, had you feared sort of a backlash from the fans, though? Because you broke the rules with that kind of turned some heads. You hadn't feared...
From the fans?
Yeah. You hadn't feared reprisals from the...
No, not from the fans at all.
Yeah.
No, because we knew... we were our own worst critics. And we always... If we had a number which sounded even vaguely similar to something that we'd done in the past, that was it. Forget it. It wasn't even recorded. What we believed we were doing quality music, and we believed in what we were doing. And if you've got strong enough convictions like that, that should hold true at the end of the day. Well, it did. There's no doubt about it.
But it in fact sell as well as the first two, did it? The sales kind of...
I don't know. I'm perfectly truthful with you. I don't know what the sales were of any of the albums. So
is that right?
That's something you didn't bother to. No.
As long as people came to the shows, you were...
Well, the people did come to the shows.
So that's all really
Because you see, the most important part of it was that once an album was recorded, and basically you did go out to promote the album in the early days, and those numbers went into the set. That's just the beginning of it, really, because then they started to take on yet another identity, because we weren't just prepared just to just play them note for note as they'd been recorded. We really made the numbers work for us, and we just kept improving them and improving them. The proof of that is on Song Remains the Same album, where you can hear the live versions of the studio cuts. Yes, the important part was the fact that we also didn't... I didn't do the same guitar solos every night or whatever. It's always in a state of change and flux, purely. And that's the way it was, that kept us musically alive. And that was the important part for me. Providing that was always happening, then we'd always be able to be coming out with good albums. Personal view, I'm saying. But everyone, I think the rest of them would agree with that, if they were here now.
So that's kind of a humorous little anecdote, though. He was, you guys came to Japan after you released Led Zeppelin III. And we were doing like an acoustic number on stage, and he was like third from the front. and he waved at you, he waved back.
Was it?
One of the great memories of his youth there. You just wanted to point
Okay,
that out.
well, one of my recollections of being over here was that, you see, we started to pace the set so that we used to have a drum solo over it, obviously, you know, and that would be the point where we would rush back and have a drink and go to the loo if necessary. There's another part of it, it could have been Osaka actually, where we did an acoustic set, you know, and that's when John Bonham used to go off, and it just so happened that he didn't come back on stage, and we had the whole audience chanting, "Mr. Bonham, Mr. Bonham," and finally he appeared.
What happened?
I don't know, I think he got stuck in the toilet or something, I don't remember. Or it was a long walk to the toilet or something like that, yeah.
Well, so your acoustic...
So that was, yeah.
It was extended. It was extended.
Yeah, we did, yeah, that's right, it was in fact. We
Yeah,
played
well,
Friends that night, which we hadn't never played that.
Is that right? Well, that may be the reason why he asked us, because he said you guys did like a sort of an acoustic session. He said for
but we used to do that anyway.
Uh-huh.
We had, you know, we had employed the acoustic set, so to speak, by this point.
Did you think you were like breaking the rules for a hard rock band? Was it rather daring to do that at the time?
Well, were we a hard rock band? We certainly played hard rock music,
Yeah, well, that's what you...
but we also played, as I said, you know, we played music that's thunderous one moment and then like a whisper the next. So
Yeah.
it was all part of the light and shade and the contrast. And
Dynamics.
that's why we could do a 3.5 hour set and people weren't bored, because we just went through so many different areas of music.
Getting to the rather historical fourth record, Stairway to Heaven was the first time you guys put lyrics on it, in your inner sleeve.
Yeah, that's right.
Was that because you considered, you must have thought it was a very significant effort to take the time and trouble?
Oh, I thought the lyrics were, well, we all did. I mean, I think that Robert was really inspired at that point when we actually rehearsed the number. So actually it took quite a lot of running through because it was a lot to remember. And to get across, you know, and he was sort of listening to it and starting to jot down things, you know. And, when we actually came to the point of running it all the way through, you know, from beginning to end, we were saying, well, how about trying to sing it along? He had about 80% of the lyrics already done. So you can pretty much say that he was really inspired by this, you know. And it was, you know, yeah, sure we put the lyrics in there.
Did you think that he had kind of lived up to your expectations, your original vision with that song?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. What do you mean as far as me writing lyrics, you mean?
Well, I mean, you said you had originally wanted him to become his own lyricist. I guess
sure, I'd wanted him to do the lyrics, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, oh, of course, yeah, but I mean, so the whole, every single member of the band was really in overdrive, you know, even, you know, on that album and even further through, you know. What you're saying there, I mean, you're just sort of talking about Robert, maybe my contribution, but we certainly mustn't forget, you know, for instance, John Bonham's. I mean, he's such an inventive drummer, I mean, the like of which we won't ever see again. But, you know, every drummer will pay homage to John Bonham.
I guess another notable element of the fourth album is the jacket itself. Whereas the first three just were sort of regular album jackets, the fourth seems sort of conceal certain meaning or significance. Is he reading too much into it?
No, it is. Oh, it is. It's well, to begin with, it's untitled. That came as a result of having just getting totally bored with the sort of reviews that we had, and frustrated with certainly with the record reviews, that, you know, because I guess it just went over their heads, to be honest with you, on a first listening on some of these, like the third album, for instance. You know, probably listening for A Whole Lot of Love, which wasn't there, and missing the whole point. And we decided to put out an album that was untitled, just as a statement to say, well, here we are. You know, it doesn't matter what you think, reviewers. You know, basically, if you don't like it, you don't have to. You know, They'd have to be part of it and buy it. But yes, it's an old countryman with taking his sticks back to his own sticks that he's collected away. It's just the old country way of life, and it's on a building which is being demolished, which is the old ways of going, and then you've got all the sort of skyscrapers going up. Yeah, paving grass with concrete type of statement.
Well, so the intention was you're trying to say there's more to this band than just the hard.
No, I mean you asked me. Didn't you ask me to describe what the cover was about?
You were saying, but
I did.
The other part of the question was why did you decide to do something that had some sort of a message or some sort of meaning to it, whereas the first three didn't seem to have that? What change took place in the band that would compel you to do something like that?
Well, I guess just the band's maturity, I suppose. It's part and parcel of what it's about, really, isn't it? Yeah. Development.
He was just saying he asked the question because you were recognized or pigeonholed as just a hard rock outfit in certain quarters, and maybe you guys felt it was time to kind of.
But who buy? Who buy? This is the point.
Fans.
Well, there you are. Not you're answering the question, aren't you?
But did you want to shake up sort of the people with something like?
No, not at all. No, the only. As I say, putting out an untitled album at that point in time, you can imagine I had a hell of a job with the record company. One hell of a job.
They didn't know what to make with it.
No, I sat in an office with the lawyers for a whole couple of hours. And they argued the fact that you had to have Atlantic's name on it, and I said, well, we don't want anything on it. Even that's a clue. If you want it, you can put it on the inside, so when they open it, they can see it as they pull the record out. But they didn't really like the idea of putting for a second printing, so they gave in the end. Yeah.
The fifth album, he thought, was a major departure. In that it seemed each song seemed more whole, seemed more rounded, seemed more solid. If looking back in retrospect, how do you see the fifth album? What do you see as the differences from the record before that?
I don't know. Well, certainly the third album and the fourth album touched on environmental issues within the lyrics, that's for sure. Although that's not answering the question. It was just you see, it was just that when we went to record that, it was just a summing up of where we were at that point of time with the writing. Mm-hmm. As I say, not having to bother about coming up with a follow-up to a single or whatever, because there weren't any singles, and that's what all the albums really were anyway.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'm not quite sure I follow you.
Well, I mean, we had the material that was written right at that point of time and recorded. Mm-hmm. And so really that was a summing up of where we were at musically.
Mm-hmm. But is it hard for you to look back in retrospect and kind of, objectively size up? Because when we were talking about the 60s, everything seemed so clear, but now we're getting into the 70s and Zeppelin stuff, it seems like the answers are becoming kind of foggy.
Are they really?
Maybe the question,
you should ask better. Yeah, right, well then don't lumber me with that or you'll get a really nice answer. Do you believe that?
No, it just seemed like it was getting, maybe it was a little bit hard to. It's something you are not asked very much. Well,
probably not very much. I mean, considering I've probably been doing interviews around this sort of stuff for quite a long time now. Depending on trying to give a fresh light on something, you have to really have a question that will stimulate you. And if you're saying it seems to be more of working more of a group as a group, I mean, I consider we were working as a group right from the start. I'm just saying that it matured as it went along.
I think what's happening, because the gentleman is such an aficionado, he's searching for hidden meanings.
Yeah.
And I mean, basically, in a phrase, music is what the band was saying.
Yeah.
And I think he's looking for a meaning behind the music, and missing possibly the message, which is the music.
Huh. But what you're saying is...
I mean, that's my interpretation as an observer.
Yeah. I was wondering what
putting words into
yeah. it's tough to kind of pick apart music logically, because when you make it, you don't say this goes here and this goes here. It's just, it all sort of comes together in your mind. And it's a creative pursuit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to pick it apart logically. Maybe that's the problem with having it. It just seemed like that we were kind of getting off base, and we were kind of confusing you with the questions there. So maybe the line of questioning was a little bit vague.
I just don't think there's an answer to the question. I think he's digging very deep and very. I mean, they're clever questions in that respect, but I don't think there is an answer personally. I really think the music is what the band was saying.
Okay, well, if you had anything to say about the fifth album...
Well, I mean, we've said that basically on the fourth, the untitled one, is the fact that, the music is going to be, doing the talking for us, basically. So, and putting the record straight as far as what, this backlog of criticism that have gone on,
Yeah, kind
I think it's quite fair to say, as we're all sitting around here at this point in time, I mean, so many years later, I think we've proved our point.
Yeah, Kultaya, his favorite Zeppelin record is Presence, which probably took on a different approach because Robert had gotten injured in some way, I guess, before the recording of that record. So you were forced to take sort of a different approach. Is that...
Well, absolutely, because, I mean, it was... yes, it's a fact. Robert had had an accident and had broken his ankle, and obviously the recording process was overlying everything. Seeing the guy sitting in being taken in a wheelchair and sitting on a stool and stuff all the way through the chair, all the way through it, and also the added fact that it had been said that they weren't sure whether this would break again once they took the cast off. So, sure, it was, maybe that sort of uncertainty and things might well have reflected in the music. But at the time, it was just a sort of, getting right back to sort of basics, and it was that was recorded in about 3 weeks actually, that album. But yeah, it is an interesting album, that's for sure.
When you say get back to basics, what do you mean?
Well, it was just getting into the studio, and we actually wrote some of the tracks before we got to. We recorded this in Germany while we were in LA, and had some of the structures for them, but other ones were actually written in the studio. While we were sort of doing it, but the whole thing was done in 3 weeks. So it was, really sort of fast, right back to, considering the one that preceded it was Physical Graffiti, which, in fact, that employed the track Houses of the Holy, which was the name of the album before that. But in fact, that was a track that was left over from that one, and there were a few. In the Light was another one. And that's why that became a double album, because we used the extra surplus that we had. And obviously that took quite a long time, a double album, so I wanted to go in and just really do one really quickly, and get just sort of basically get up, wake up, go in the studio until you couldn't, do any more, then go to the hotel, sleep, and back in the studio type of thing. Living the whole thing without any breaks of going home or anything, okay?
The
record itself seemed to sort of project a sort of Led Zeppelin magic, is the word he uses, which I guess he hadn't heard for quite a while there. Had you guys been aware of it yourself, that something was something different? You said you wanted to get back to basics.
Well, as I say, that album was I've given you the circumstances as far as the actual recording of it went. It was just we were staying in Munich for this 3-week period, and or 2 weeks in fact, for the actual basic tracks and everything. And it was, as I say, recording, going to sleep, recording, going to sleep, recording. So it was a very, it intensified, project. So whereas, for instance, the preceding one, that had been recorded in many different places, on location, in studios, in town, and all over the place.
So we actually maybe get the true essence of the band.
Well, in so much, you see, as the first album was done like that, you see, except that we were going home, and then coming back to the studio, and this one was really living in.
The loss of John Bonham instantaneously disbanded Led Zeppelin. Hypothetical question: had he not died, do you think the band would have continued to grow creatively? Had you guys reached a limit at all?
No, I don't think we ever hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
No way. We were just about to embark upon an American tour anyway, had he not passed away. And we certainly would have recorded after that. In fact, we discussed the sort of thing he and I had, that we were going to go from a real hard-hitting, more riffs, heavier riffs, but including John Paul Jones's keyboard, because by that point, you see, synthesizers rather, by that point of time, in through the outdoor, synthesizers had finally come on the market, which was sort of user-friendly, so to speak. He'd been interested in synthesizers all the way through, I might add, but it could actually be employed, within the group. So we probably that's where we would have gone.
You had a new vocabulary to kind of enhance the.
Well, another dimension, that's all, but we were always adding dimensions all the way through.
You said in an interview with Musician magazine that you actually wanted to get the band together again. Is that really true?
When did I say that?
The latest issue has an interview with you. You say something to the effect that you would like to see Led Zeppelin reformed.
I don't know whether I said it like that. I said it was probably put to me, are Led Zeppelin going to get back together, and would you do a tour? And my reply to that would be, I love Led Zeppelin's music. In fact, when I did my own tour outright, I was doing numbers from, because of, obviously, I love that music. And it wouldn't be a bad idea if it was going to be played at all by anybody, to actually have who's going to play it better than the people who actually, originally were involved with it. Unfortunately, of course, John Bonham wouldn't be there, but there we are. I mean, at least 3 out of 4 still going to do it better than 1 out of 4.
Here's an off the wall question, but if you could sum up in a nutshell what Led Zeppelin is and was to you, how would you put it in just in a nutshell?
Well, it's not just what it was to me; it's what it has been for many, many people. All the people that have been touched by the music. I mean, it's it's certainly shaped and stated a whole musical criteria with it, and it's still alive.
Would it be possible for you to single out your one favorite Zeppelin song and one favorite Zeppelin album? Is it possible?
I can't. It's difficult to do. I can't really say it's one particular track. And obviously, there's. I think I like Physical Graffiti as an overall album, actually. As far as the group working together and being involved in all these different dimensions. But it's hard. I can't say that's my favourite of all of them, because it isn't. But that's one that's would be near the top of the list. Anyway.
Any one song, is there one quintessential?
No, there's many of them.
Okay, that'll do it.
Okay, thanks. I've answered as best I could.
Yeah. Well,
and I've also trying to think of what he's actually getting at the same time. So
I've been doing this for 10 years now, and one of the major problems we have here in the language is that often the Japanese interviewer will get off on a very abstract tangent.
Yeah, but what I was doing was closing the question down so that he could follow it on.
Yeah.
Rather than having a sticking point, which you don't want. You don't want to break the sort of flow of the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't mean to myself. I wasn't purposely trying to do that.
What I try to do is, rather than confront him about it, I try to, pose the problem to you there, and maybe try to...
Well, so I'm the one who's doing. He's the one who's asking the questions, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks anyway. Well, I guess get the photos.
All right.